Please continue to stand by for today's conference. Conference will begin in a few minutes. Again, thank you for your patience. Please continue to stand by. Please continue to stand by for today's conference. Conference will begin momentarily. Again, thank you for your patience. Please continue to stand by. Welcome and thank you for standing by. All lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session. At that time, please press star 1 and record your name as prompted. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn today's meeting over to Jackie McGinnis. Thank you. You may begin.
Thanks, Carolyn. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm NASA Press Secretary Jackie McGinnis. And earlier today, NASA leadership made an exciting announcement for the future to better position the agency for exploration farther out into the solar system than ever before. So going forward, the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate will be organized into 2 mission directorates. An Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate, ESD, led by Jim Free, will define and manage systems development for programs critical to NASA's Artemis program, and planning for NASA's Moon to Mars exploration approach in an integrated manner. A Space Operations Mission Directorate, Space Ops, led by Kathy Leaders, will focus on launch and space operations, including the ISS, continued commercialization of low Earth orbit, and eventually sustaining operations on the Moon. So today I'm happy to be joined by Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, Associate Administrator Bob Cabana, Associate Administrator for Space Ops, Kathy Leaders, and Associate Administrator for ESD, Jim Free. You'll get a chance to ask each of them your burning questions, but first I'd like to hand it over to Administrator Nelson to explain NASA leadership's decision to establish the ESD and Space Ops Mission Directorates.
Hey guys, I hope that you watched the town hall that we had. Because there was a lot of substance there, and I want to get to your questions without repeating the things that were said, but let me just kind of summarize real quickly. We've taken the former Mission Directorate, Human Exploration, and we are creating two mission directorates. One is space operations, and the other is exploration. And we have two pros that are leading it. Kathy Leaders, who has been phenomenally successful in the program of commercial cargo as well as commercial crew to the International Space Station. And over the years of establishing that, now exceptionally successfully, it has grown, and it's going to grow more once we get Boeing up and running. And so Kathy is going to continue in that leadership role. Jim Free has returned to the agency, having been the head of the Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, as well as a former deputy mission directorate back under Bill Gerstenmaier. And so we were able to get him to come out of the private life back to NASA. And he will concentrate on our exploration out into the heavens. We can go into all the details. We did it today at noon in that town hall, but if you want to get back into a lot of that detail, we're happy to do that. So basically what we're saying is it's more than an organizational change. It's about helping us as we set the stage for the next 20 years, and we are defining NASA's future in a growing space economy, and that's what's happening. Look at all of the success that you're seeing as commercial ventures get involved, and not just talking about like the Inspiration flight. I'm talking about look at all these commercial landings that are going to go to the moon. Look at the private commercial rocket companies that are going to deliver those payloads, some of which are NASA scientific experiments. And I'll just close by one example. In 23, the Viper, that's the mission that's going to the South Pole, and we're going to a crater where we think there is the best concentration for water because of the angle of the sun, as well as water underneath the surface. And of course, the import of that is you find water on the moon, then we can make rocket fuel, hydrogen and oxygen, and we can have a gas station on the moon. A lot of this is coming out of the commercial ventures. So truly, this is a new day in NASA's future in a growing space economy, and of course maintaining the U.S. leadership in space. So with that, let me stop. Jackie?
Now I'd like to hand it over to Deputy Administrator Malroy for your thoughts.
Thank you so much. So I said earlier today when I was talking to the NASA workforce that this decision is a testament to their hard work over the last decade. So as I reflect back on my time in the Space Shuttle program, and then, of course, when we began to build the International Space Station, that our entire human spaceflight program was defined by these single programs in low Earth orbit. And we were just beginning to reach out to try to spin off this technology, partner with commercial to see if they could take on some of these roles. And I have to say, I don't think in anybody's wildest dreams would we have predicted how incredibly successful that enterprise has been. And it gives us a tremendous capability. We remain passionately dedicated to doing microgravity research. We are doing very important work on the International Space Station every day. We're just entering, actually the National Academies is entering its second decadal survey to help point us to the highest value science, and we think that will continue to be true. But as we go forward, we have the opportunity to eventually transition some of those capabilities, which frees us up to look out for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. As leaders, we have a responsibility to arm our workforce with the best support system we can possibly design. So looking to the future, we know that the next 20 years will look very different than the last 20. And so as we think about these strategic roles, continuing to foster an economy in low Earth orbit and growing solar system exploration, going to the moon, achieving objectives that will help us send the first people to Mars to perform science there. As we think about all of these, this is what drove the decision, which has been in work since early this year, based on the expansion of all these human spaceflight programs and a long train of developmental programs coming over the horizon. These two new mission directorates will build on those successes and lessons learned from the Human Exploration and Operations Space Mission Directorate. So creating two separate directorates will ensure the critical areas have a focused oversight team in place to support and execute for mission success. And these new directorates are directly linked by their charters, and the organizations and their leaders will work closely together. Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate will manage the integration and systems development for Moon to Mars. They will own the architecture and design the developmental programs. Jim and his team will focus on areas such as definition and development of systems and cultivate and expand our international partners in the Moon to Mars architecture. Space operations will continue to carry out space exploration, research, technology demonstrations, and space economy development, and continue our international partnerships with the space station. Both mission directorates are engineering the future of Moon to Mars exploration from different ends of the spaceflight continuum. With a tighter focus on exploration, we'll continue to lead the nation while building a coalition of international partners in deep space exploration through our Artemis Accords. This approach allows one mission directorate to operate in space while the other builds future space systems. Kathy and the ops team will focus on commercial crew, including Boeing certification, as well as bringing a third commercial cargo resupply provider on board. And of course, always will be responsible for ensuring the safety and success of all of our missions, including private astronaut missions, extension of ISS operations, and the continued growth of low Earth orbit. Kathy and Jim will establish a tightly knit interface to ensure operations is ingrained in the maturation of all future systems and work at the handoff of systems as they move into an operations and sustainment phase. Kathy and Jim are both experienced, proven NASA leaders, and I am confident their leadership will ensure there is no disruption to our work as we focus on the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will open it up for questions. Caroline?
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please press star 1. Make sure your phone is unmuted and record your name as prompted. You may press star 2 to withdraw that request. And please limit yourself to one question. You may press star 1 again for any follow-up questions. Our first question or comment comes from Marcia Dunn from AP. Your line is open.
Yes, hi. Thank you for Administrator Nelson and anyone else on the panel. I know that NASA's been undergoing an internal review for the schedule for Artemis. So my question is, as of today, what is the latest projected timeline for Artemis 1, 2, and 3, as of today anyway? Thank you.
Artemis 1 will be at the end of this year or the first part of next year. Then we're going to the moon with humans in late 23 or early 24. And then, if you have a coin, you can flip it as to what's going to happen in the legal wrangling that's going on right now. What is the federal judge going to decide? Is there going to be, when is he going to decide? What is the further legal possibilities about that? And once we know better about things like that, then we can answer on Artemis 3, and then after that, Artemis 4, putting up the gateway. We've got a lot of international partners all signed up. They're excited about it, and so forth and so on. So does that help you out, Marcia?
Well, I suppose so. So you're aiming to get the first Artemis off still by the end of this year or early part of next year. Is 2024 still feasible technically for Artemis 3? I mean, is that legal wrangling aside, as where things stand now technically, would you have a shot at 2024 for the moon landing?
You want to call the federal judge and ask him? So the answer is we don't know at this point. We're gonna move with all dispatch as soon as we know the legal realm, and then we can better answer your question then.
Thank you. Our next question or comment comes from Micah Maidenberg from Wall Street Journal. Your line is open.
Yeah, hi everybody. Deputy Administrator Melroy, I think you just said there's going to be a third provider for commercial crew. Is that right? And if that's so, could you elaborate on why NASA wanted to pursue that? Thank you.
If I did, then I misspoke and apologize. It's a commercial cargo provider, a third commercial cargo Sierra Space.
Okay, can you elaborate on sort of why you're bringing in a third provider for cargo?
The contract for CRS-2 was awarded. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Kathy Leaders. The contract for CRS-2 was awarded in 2016, and so we've actually been working with Sierra Space for a while now to bring their third capability online. So it's not new news. So we've been working on this for a little bit. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question or comment comes from Jeff Faust from Space News. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. A question for the administrator. When agencies undertake reorganizations like this, it's usually because they're trying to solve a problem they've identified or to ward off a problem that they believe is going to come up. What problem are you addressing by this decision to split HEOMD into the separate operations and exploration systems directorates?
Jeff, were you able to tune in on our town hall meeting?
I did. I was hoping you could explain in a little bit more detail what problem this solves. I know you made some discussion about improved oversight as an example.
No, we went into this in detail in the town hall, and it's basically that we've had this phenomenal success in the commercial arena, that the growth has been so large that the long and short of it is the existing or the previous HEO is almost half the budget of NASA. And you need to have the ability of two brilliant people to run the respective responsibilities. One, basically space operations, and two, the exploration as we go back to the moon and on to Mars. Does that answer your question?
That'll do. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question or comment comes from Gina Sansari from ABC News. Your line is open.
For the administrator, are there some missions that aren't on paper yet that you'd like to see furthered with this new organization? Something that's sort of bubbling around in the back of your mind.
Well, I think there are some people that would like to send me to Mars on a one-way trip, but other than that, I think that you pretty well know what's going on. Look at all the CLIPS missions. Goodness gracious. And by the way, beware. China, the Chinese space program is sending 3 missions to the South Pole. I already told you about our Viper mission. This is increasingly a place of importance. And we want to make sure that everybody understands that might go there that this is for international scientific research and development. Pam, you want to add anything to this?
I sure do. Thank you, sir. Gina, we have an amazing capability that we've been developing to take humans to deep space. We've been really focused on developing SLS, Orion, and the ground systems to support it. It is time for us to talk about what we are going to do with this capability. So yes, there is, as I mentioned, there is a string of development programs facing us in the future. The infrastructure needed to support sustained human operations, and that includes things like comms and power infrastructure. In addition to that, we have to have the tools to enable people to do science on the surface of the moon. So certainly we've been discussing things like habitats and transportation rovers. And then, of course, we've got Gateway, which is our logistics cache, the human lander system. Both of those are currently, I would say, underway. The HLS will get underway when we finish our legal wrangles. But in addition to that, we have to be thinking and laying in plans for how to get to a Mars transportation, Mars descent, and Mars ascent vehicle. And we need to understand what we're doing on the moon that provides direct capability and when we will have achieved the objectives that we can begin those programs. So yes, we are looking at a steady stream of development programs, and there's a lot of work and analysis that's been done for the last decade or more to define what that should look like.
And don't forget all the other things that we're doing. We are getting ready to go back to Mars and pick up samples that we are now depositing in these titanium vials, and this is all a part of it. This is all a part of our reaching out there, getting prepared to go to Mars. And then, aside from the human exploration, look at all of the other robotic stuff that we're doing and the scientific stuff. We're going to Venus for the first time in 30 years. We've got the telescope going up December the 17th, and it's going to be looking back over 13 billion years, capturing light from that long ago. We're continuing our search for other life. We're going to asteroids. We've already sucked up some of the asteroid on a mission called Bennu. It is now en route back to planet Earth. And we're going to check out all the elements in that sample that we've got, trying to understand the origins of the universe and what are the building blocks of life that are out there. And then don't forget climate change. Remember, we announced the 5 great observatories over the next 10 years that will, with our 30 assets up there now, will give absolute precision on our measurements of what is happening to the climate. So there's a lot that's going on, and I didn't even talk about aeronautics. We've got a needle-nosed supersonic, that once it becomes a transport, you can cut travel time in half and you can fly over populated areas at supersonic flight speeds because it will have a low sonic boom. So there's a lot of stuff.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question or comment comes from Irene Klotz from Aviation. Your line is open.
Thank you. For Kathy, are there any ongoing programs that from HEO that will be transferred to exploration systems development? And are there any impacts on the contracts that NASA has signed and is currently negotiating with Boeing and with Lockheed for those long-term buys of Orion and SLS cores that'll cover missions well into the future?
So thanks, Irene. We're obviously establishing an exploration systems development organization, so the projects and the programs under development right now for exploration will be under Jim, and under space operations, we'll be setting up an exploration operations team that will be beginning to do the planning and working with Jim on the development side. But from a contracts perspective, or a strategy perspective, no changes. There should be no changes right now. Obviously, as time evolves, we'll be working on, Jim will be obviously working on both of the development contracts, and we'll be looking at long-term exploration operations pieces. But those, as they are rolling out, Jim and I will be talking to you guys about that. But I don't see, and Jim, jump in, he's right here, so, right now, and as he said, he's on day 2 of his job, so we'll give him maybe a little bit of chance to get his feet under him, but, the goal is to keep, like we told the team today, the goal is to keep the missions going and, things staying on track, and, we've got a lot of things in front of us that we can't have go through a bump, and so really right now we're just making sure that we're doing a smooth transition and working it together.
I guess it's kind of like if MOXIE was just getting started now, would that be something that would have been the bailiwick of the Exploration Systems Development Division and then transitioned into an operations? Like, I'm just having a hard time getting my head around really I understand that the whole pie is getting bigger and you're trying to position the agency to accommodate and take advantage of that and lead in that, but I'm having a little trouble getting my head around like practically what that means for the NASA programs.
So right now the systems that are coming online, Irene, obviously like Pam talked about, we have different systems coming through the pipeline. So obviously, SLS and Orion haven't flown their first flight yet, so they are still in development, right? And Jim and I will work together on when does their development move into an operational cadence. That's still in front of us where that break point is. The systems that are in the middle of development, like Pam was talking about, Gateway, HOS, other things that are at some level started, obviously also go over with Jim. And then he's dreaming up more systems, right? So, and my job is to follow along and then make sure that as these systems are coming online and are ready to be worked into an operation, we'll be working through that transition.
And this is Jim Free. I just add, I think the way to think about it is with Orion and SLS coming up on their first flight with Artemis, right? That's going to prove out a set of capabilities as the uncrewed version flies around the moon. And then for Artemis 2, we're going to put the crew and the ECLS in, and it's another step of development. Then Artemis 3, it'll be crew with ECLS, a few smaller systems, and then working to get the crew down to the surface. And then we can kind of look and say, okay, we've done the development for Orion. I'm just saying this as an example. So maybe Orion then goes over to space operations, and then we do Artemis 4 with a Block 1B, EUS, and okay, we've proven that out. Now that can go over to operations. So the answer is each one's going to depend, but the thought is let's get the first flight or first few flights out, prove it out, and then we move it from development to operations, and we would start working on the next thing, and it might be a cargo element, or it might be a new system that's going up to augment Gateway. The thought is to then take that development team and bring it back to work on the next thing, so that the operations team, we're not going to duplicate. We'll depend on each other. The operations team can then do what they do best, and that's operate the vehicle, which is in a different model and a different mode than a development team works.
Thanks, Irene. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Eric Berger from Ars Technica. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. Administrator, can you address concerns that Kathy's position here, some people are saying it's kind of a demotion, and it's happening in the wake of the HLS awards, that the process that she oversaw. That award was made about 5 months ago. Since then there's been a significant outcry from Congress. There's been, you mentioned the federal judge, some of the bidders were unhappy. And now she's being moved out of the oversight for the HLS program. Is that just a coincidence, or maybe you could address that? Thanks.
Well, I have addressed that over and over, and I don't mean to make light of your question, but I will repeat again what I've said. Kathy did such an extraordinary job, and the proof's in the pudding. We see the success of the commercial crew as well as commercial cargo. And that whole thing has grown to the point now we're talking about private astronauts, we're talking about these inspiration-type missions, we're talking about additional research on the International Space Station, we're talking about extension of the International Space Station to 2030, and the preparation of a commercial industry that could step in and have an International Space Station themselves, or a commercial space station. We want to see commercial activity robust, and we're already seeing that in and around the moon with the CLIPS missions that I referenced. Now, the long and short of it is, between that, under the old HEO, and the exploration, that's half of NASA's budget. That's a lot to swallow. So we want to be able to look to the future. We want to expand our vision of what we can do out in space. We want to look beyond Mars and all these other robotic missions that we're talking about. And so when you put all that together, you need two brilliant leaders. And fortunately, we have that. And if you want to hear the words, as I have already said earlier today in the town hall meeting, we, Pam, Bob, and I, as well as me, have total confidence in Kathy, as we have in Jim. And that's the best I can do to answer you. I know it's kind of nice to take and look at it from a standpoint of another approach, but what I just told you is the truth.
And this is the Deputy Administrator, and I'd like to let you know that this discussion started well before the HLS award.
As a matter of fact, this started in the early coming together of the Biden administration before he was actually sworn in.
Transition.
And the transition made a very strong recommendation that we do what we have announced today.
Thank you both. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Joey Roulette from The Verge. Your line is open.
Hey, thank you. Question for Deputy Administrator Melroy. There are some other critics who are saying that this reorg plan, they kind of fear that this is going to create two competing and unnecessary bureaucracies with different cultures and contracting mechanisms. I'm just wondering what you make of that, and wanted to know whether there's going to be any coordination between the two directorates and what that would look like. And then I just had like another kind of example question. Would the effort to transition the ISS to privately built components be managed under the Space Ops Directorate or the Exploration Directorate, since in a way that would involve new technology? Thanks.
Thanks. I'll answer your second question first. The work with private partners to transition to a commercial follow-on to ISS will stay in the Operations Directorate. It's directly relevant to what we do every day on ISS, and the development will be done by private industry. We will just be a customer, and so we will be very focused on maintaining the continuity of our operations in low Earth orbit and the science and the human exploration that we do. As far as the bureaucracy, we're actually not adding a whole new layer of people. There are very few additional positions that will be required. All of this work is being done today, and all of it has to be coordinated between different divisions within HEO. So the challenges that we have in coordinating across organizations is exactly the same as it is today. And we have boards and other mechanisms in place to ensure that the communications occur. It's an interesting experience having done this in the DoD. I was a test pilot, and we had vehicles that were under development and test and validation and verification, and then you hand it over to an operational unit. And typically there's extremely close coordination because you don't want to hand off something to operators that doesn't fill what they need and doesn't perform the functions that they need. So I think there's a lot of models that we can look to, but this is really about the same work that we have to do every day on coordination.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joey. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Marcia Smith from spacepolicyonline.com. Your line is open.
Thanks so much. I was curious, on the surface, this looks like you're going back to the organization that you had before 2011. And is that a correct analogy? Are you basically going back to, that exact split between what the old Space Operations Mission Director was doing and what ESMD was doing at the time? And also, Jim Bridenstine had wanted to do something like this, but he could not get congressional approval for a reorganization. But I understand that you do have congressional approval for this one. So what did you do differently in order to win Congress's nod?
Hey, Marcia, this is Bob Cabana. And as far as how we're being organized, yes, we had exploration and HEO separated. And the reason we did was we had the Constellation program, and Constellation was doing the development of all the exploration work, and the ops side was operating all our current systems. With the cancellation of Constellation and no immediate program going forward for those folks that were in there, it made sense at that time to absorb that into the ops directorate under Bill Gerstenmaier, and it became HEO, finding work for all those people. So now that we have built, as the administrator has said, this highly successful organization that's half our budget, it's absolutely the appropriate time to have a focus on the exploration side, separate from the ops side, and transition things as Pam has explained. Yes, we did get approval from the administration and our stakeholders on the Hill to proceed with this reorganization, and that was needed before we could announce it and move forward. So we achieved the appropriate approvals that we needed, and we are now moving forward.
If I could just follow up on that. So Bill Gerstenmaier, of course, is the one who ran Space Ops last time, and now Kathy's going to lead it this time. I know that he was one of her mentors. So did Kathy pick Space Ops of the two, or how was the decision made as to which of the two would lead which one?
That was my decision with consultation with Bob and Pam, and we decided, I'll repeat, Marcia, what I said earlier. Kathy has done such an outstanding job in bringing about a successful commercial operation that it was obvious, it was as easy a decision as falling off a log for me, that's exactly where she should be.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Next question.
Our next question is from Mike Wall from space.com. Your line is open.
Thank you, guys. This is probably for both Kathy and Jim. Yeah, I mean, both of you guys referenced you'd be working together on a bunch of different missions and a bunch of different projects. Could you just maybe walk through an example of how that cooperation might work? I mean, I know it's still early days, but yeah, just give us an example of how that coordination might work across these two different mission directorates. Thanks.
Sure. So I mentioned first, and to Pam's point earlier, right, we're not going to duplicate. So if I take Artemis 1, Artemis 1 is my responsibility, but I do that in conjunction with Kathy, who owns the folks that are doing the mission ops. So those mission ops folks are executing the mission. If I take and then Artemis 1 is done, and we look at, okay, what kind of changes do we need to make to the development programs, be it Orion or SLS, that we can make between Artemis 1 and 2, and maybe we make some of those changes, or we plug them into Artemis 3 to continue the development. And then if I kind of forecast ahead, right, that's the model that's going to be there for Artemis 1, Artemis 2, Artemis 3, and then let's say I'll pick a one out of the air that was mentioned earlier by Pam, a HAB module. We're going to start thinking about a HAB module. We're going to start doing the development of that. That's squarely in my organization, but we have to have the operations people in the front end of that development because they're going to operate it. So they will support us doing the development on the front end. So there's examples of missions that are going to happen in the next few months and years for you, to something that's years out of how I think we're going to interact. But Kathy, I think, has something to add.
Yeah, and so kind of going the back end, right? So Jim's working the development piece. Obviously, you don't flip a switch and one day go to ops, right? And so we're already starting to talk now about, okay, when are some of these things operational, and how do you go work contracts to go make sure that you can execute on that mission going forward? We can't screw up the missions that are needing to happen. We've got to make sure that those contracts and those pieces are going in line with that. So if we're having, for example, an Artemis 5 be an operational mission, we still got to make sure we're executing 1, 2, 3, and 4 with not messing things up and have to start 5 at the right time. This is going to take us working really, really closely together to make sure that we're really clean for the folks, but also making sure that we are supporting each other in the different phases. Even after things go operational, we'll be reaching over for help over on Jim's side to solve different problems. I can guarantee it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question or comment comes from Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. Your line is open.
Thank you. Marcia asked my question, so if I could like to ask Kathy for an update on the Starliner program. It's been about 6 weeks since Boeing and NASA decided to stand down from OFT-2 to address the valve issues. Any update on what's been going on with inspections and finding the cause of the issue with the valves, and when do you still expect OFT-2 could launch this year, or is it looking to be more likely next year? Thanks.
So I think the team's still going through their troubleshooting. You know, they've been working through, in particular on the valve, like looking at, and we tend to talk about the dry side and the wet side because the internal kind of workings of the valve, which is the wetted side, it is a little bit harder for us to get access to. We've worked through on the dry side, kind of collecting data and looking at the different aspects, and now we're working the timing of on the dry side. To be able to do that, you actually have to remove valves from the service modules, and so we're actually getting ready over the next few weeks for kind of a decision point for us with the program on what to do with that and the options for potentially pulling another service module forward, or looking at options for using that particular service module in the operational mission. I think right now the timeline and the manifest for it through the end of the year is pretty tight right now. So my gut is it would be probably more likely to be next year, but we're still working through that timeline. I don't think we're ready to formally address when exactly the OFT-2 mission is. But I think the team's making great progress on further troubleshooting, and I absolutely know we're going to fix this problem before we fly crew.
Thanks, Kathy. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Tim Fernholz from Quartz. Your line is open.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to answer some questions. I have one question. I know the decision was easy as falling off a log, but I just wanted to follow up on the personnel choices for the two directorates. I think a lot of people outside see Kathy as having led two successful development efforts in commercial crew and then being part of commercial cargo. So I'm curious, why did you think she should stay there instead of working on the development effort that has been delayed on Artemis? And what about Jim suits him to be the leader of the Artemis development? And just to follow up on the question you had to your first answer, Mr. Nelson, with Artemis 2, you referred to that as going to the moon, and I'm curious, do you think if Artemis 2 gets in orbit around the moon by 2024, does that fulfill NASA's policy goal there? Thank you.
Do you remember Apollo 8?
I was not alive, but I've heard about it.
Okay, well, you know what it was. It was humans going to the moon for the first time. And that brought a whole new revelation at Christmas 1968 of the pictures of the moon looking back at Earth, a perspective that we had never had, and that was a major achievement. And after Apollo 17, we have not been back to the moon with humans, and we are in Artemis 2, a mission that will be some 11 days, extraordinary, way out beyond the moon, further than any human has ever been. So with regard to your second question, now what was your first question?
I'm just curious for Kathy and Jim's new assignments, given Kathy's experience bringing spacecraft development programs to fruition, why is she on the operational side? And then for Mr. Free, what makes him the right person to do this kind of development?
Both of these people are extremely qualified, and I have told you how I came to the decision. which is an obvious decision. I used an old Southern colloquialism, as easy a decision as falling off a log. It was obvious, it was common sense that Kathy's success should continue in the Space Operations Mission Director.
And then in terms of Mr. Freeh's qualifications?
I think we've answered that one, so I think we'll move on to the next.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ken Kramer from Space Up Close. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for doing this. My question is for, well, the administrator or anybody who wants to answer this, maybe Jim Free. Can you give us a more detailed vision of what NASA plans for Artemis 4 and beyond, and when do you expect astronauts to visit the Gateway? What will be the role of the Gateway? Thanks.
Yeah. So 4 and 5 are Artemis 4 and 5 are missions that are critical with our international partners, with the addition of IHAB on Artemis 4 and Esprit on Artemis 5. So that's as we bring in the international partners in their substantial roles there. So that's 4 and 5. And the second part of your question was around
when will the astronauts visit the Gateway?
Go ahead, Captain.
So the astronauts are going to be part of those assembly missions, right? We're actually, one of the great things about having the Block 1B capability is that we can do those assembly missions with the crew. So one of the reasons why, you know, the agency made the decision to do it as a co-manifested payload and was enabled to do make the decision with co-manifested payload was because of the Block 1B capability. And so what that does is that allows us to, we will be flying Gateway up on a commercial launch vehicle as an assembled Halo PBE capability. It'll be up there orbiting the moon, and then we'll be transporting first the IHAB up with the crew, and having the crew there, as we learned when we did station aggregation and assembly, is having the crew there really helps that assembly process enormously. It means you don't have to have all the robotic assembly procedures. You actually can have a whole lot more flexible interface for that assembly. And guess what? The crew's there to solve problems. I think we've all learned during space station that sometimes assembly doesn't go perfect, and you need to have a crew there that's able to fix the small problems and be able to go make it work, especially for these critical assembly missions. And so both the IHAB and the Spree missions will have crews there to help those assembly operations and get us to an assembled cislunar gateway system for us to get ready for the landing missions that we'll be conducting. So those are going to be crewed missions. 4 and 5 will be crewed missions, and we'll be getting the benefit of the crew through those assembly missions.
Thank you.
And we have time for one more question.
Thank you. And our final question comes from Vlad Pavlov from TASS News Agency. Your line is open.
Hello. Thank you for doing this. My question is for the administrator. Mr. Nelson, you said earlier that you're planning to discuss the future of the ISS with your Russian counterpart, Dmitry Rogozin, and you said you're planning to visit Russia to meet with him as soon as COVID-19 will allow. Have you decided on any time frame for that visit to Russia yet? Can we expect it to happen till the end of this year, or is it more likely next year? Thank you.
As soon as possible, depending on COVID. I hope that we get past this Delta variant. There are now some signs that there are other variants that are coming along. I am vaccinated, at the earliest possible time. I'm looking forward to it. I've talked to Dmitry several times. Bob has talked to many of his counterparts in the Russian program several times, and we're really looking forward to going to Moscow and seeing him. And I'm very enthusiastic, as I have said and have been quoted many times, that our cooperation with Russia continue. It's a long-standing one ever since 1975, and I want it, we want it, NASA wants it, America wants it to continue in the civilian space program. It's been a model for a world that is often under stress because of the politics. It's been a model of how nations can come together in peaceful cooperation in space. And I think it's important that we keep that model going.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Before I hand it back over to Administrator Nelson for his final thoughts, I want to let you know that replays of this call will be available about an hour after we finish up until 11:59 p.m. on October 21st by calling 866-360-7718 and passcode 9210. Administrator Nelson?
Okay, guys, get on your calendar December 17th for the telescope. Then the early part of next year when it will be fully ready to go. There's high risk in all of this. It, of course, is launching on an Ariane 5 from French Guiana. Get ready for October 31st, Halloween. We've got another SpaceX with crew launching. Get ready for Artemis 1 sometime at the end of the year or early next year. We got a lot going on. Let me remind you that on the 27th, Landsat 9 is launching from Vandenberg. This is another in the series of Landsats that have given us a picture of what's happening to the Earth and to our bounty that we have on this Earth, and it's given us measurements by which we can try to keep that bounty. And then, of course, notice that when these big hurricanes hit the coast, the projections of the intensity and the direction were right on, and guess who designs, builds, and launches those assets? So there is a lot going on and a lot more to come. And so thank you all for your interest. This is an exciting time to be at NASA.
Thank you. That concludes today's conference call. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.